Hi everybody, we're now making the sun hat with a boned brim, and it will flat pack this sun hat. Now when you've printed off your pattern you'll have 12 pages and you'll be thinking, right, what do I do with them now? So get page 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Cut off the right hand side of number 1. Cut off the right hand side of number 2. And do the same with 3 and 4. Now we've got to join them together. So what you do is overlap 1 and 2 so that the pattern matches up. You've got the 2 lines and you just get them centered like so. Get your tape. Now there's no point in taping bits that you're going to be cutting off, so only tape the main pattern areas. So like so. And so, I mean, you can glue, but it's a bit more of a faff. Then do overlap 2 onto 3. I haven't cut that very well, but you can see. Let's shift that down a little bit. There we are. Then overlap 3 onto 4. And then 4 onto 5. No. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, mucking up my pattern pieces. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. See, even I lose the plot. No, I'm the one making it. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you need 5, 6, 7, and 8. Where's 8 gone? I dropped all these on the floor earlier, so they all ended up messed up. So again, we cut off 5, 6, 7 right hand side. We also cut the top edge. Right, it's all taped together on a big sheet now. So what I'm going to do is cut all the pattern pieces out and then come back to you. Right, once you've got your pattern pieces cut out, you will have the brim. Now you'll be cutting 2 in fabric and 1 in interfacing if you require it. Now I do give instructions on the pattern. It depends on your fabric as to whether you want to interface both sides of the brim or just one, but read the pattern and then you'll know. This is the size medium. You've got 2 stitch lines because we'll be stitching the brim together and then we'll be stitching a channel for our boning to go in. So we've got our brim, we've got our drape around the crown, and this you just cut one of fabric, but it has to be cut on the grain line, cut across on the bias. I'll show you that when I cut it out. We have our crown, which you cut one in fabric on the fold here, and you cut one in lining. And then we have our top. We cut one in fabric, one in lining, and one in interfacing if required. But again, I'll explain as we go. So now we need our fabric. Right, once you've cut out all your pattern pieces, and I'll just let you know that I'm making the smaller brim for this demonstration. You should have 2 brim pieces, one with medium weight iron-on interfacing on one side. So the 2 brim pieces, the top with interfacing ironed on one side, the top lining, the crown lining, and the crown. Now, because the top is slightly a different length to the bottom, what I suggest you do is mark your top with either chalk or a pencil. So I'm putting top like that so that I know that's the top of those pieces. And also your bias cut drape, which you cut on the bias. Now again, I'm going to mark the top so that I know which is which. Right, first off, what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2 brim pieces and we need to join them at the back seam. So we're going to fold those over. We're going to join that brim there and that brim there. Now I'm going to do all this in white thread, which is a bit odd on a black fabric, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, and I've chosen rather a busy fabric for this. So I'm just going to join those together. Once you've joined them together, excuse me reaching over, we're going to press the seams and we're going to check that they match up. Oh look, I've trapped that under the oh dear, I don't know. But what I want to do is press the seam to one side. Normally you'd press it open, but on this, press it to one side, and on this one, press it to the opposite side. Now, and there is a reason for this. And I'm just going to check that they're going to fit nicely together. Oh. Yep. If not, adjust your seams. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a stitch line here to keep that seam down. Now the reason for that is when we put our boning in, we don't want to catch it on the seam. So I'm just going to do that now. Right, so you can see there I've done that. Now I would suggest you top stitch if you're using a contrast thread like I've done, and do another row along there just so it looks neat. But the only reason, as I say, that I'm using white thread is because you won't see what I'm doing very well. Right, put right sides together, matching those back seams, like so, and pin together. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to join these two pieces together, sewing all around the edge. Okay, so all around your seam line on the very edge. Once you've sewn your seam all around the edge, trim this seam as close as you can to the stitching without obviously cutting into your seam. Now what we need to do, take your pins out, which I've already done, turn that the right side round and press that seam all the way around so that your edges are nice and neat. We're going to do that now. If you've got very lightweight fabric, you will have to sort of roll the edges between your fingers to get them neat, like so. And do that all the way around the brim. Put some pins back in just to keep it together, because we're now going to stitch our channel for the boning. Would help if I could pick up the pins, wouldn't it? So just stitch this together. Now, when we stitch our channel for the boning, and we're going to stitch it a little way away. Now, depending on the width of your boning, now mine is 4mm, so I'm going to leave at least a 10mm gap. If your boning is 9mm, leave a 15mm gap. You need enough space to be able to thread through, but we need to leave a gap to put the boning through. So I'm going to mark that gap with a piece of chalk so that makes sure I don't close up the circle. So I'm going to stitch the channel now. So I've stitched my channel all the way around and I've left my gap. Now I need to just stitch this down with a stay stitch, again leaving a gap in the same area. So what I'm going to do is, you can see there it ties in. I'm now going to just stitch this flat down here with, you can do a big stitch. It's like a temporary stitch really, just to hold these pieces together. So there I have my channel and my stay stitch down the middle. Now I've got to get my boning. As I say, I'm using 4mm boning, but you can use up to 9, but no wider. Right, we need enough that's going to go all the way around the brim and have some over. So I'm going to cut a rough amount off. Let's see. Yeah, that should do me nicely. I've got a few inches spare. Now, because the boning will be sharp on the edges, I'm just going to pick this end up, melt it slightly with a lighter, and then press it with my fingers just so it rounds off the edges and there isn't anything sharp. Now what we've got to do is poke it through the gap in the bottom, poke it through the gap in the top, and then thread it all the way around. So make sure you're inside, you go through your top gap, and then once you get started, the only place you're going to have a minor problem is where you sewed your seam, which was why we sewed that down flat. So a bit more. Now you want to make sure that your boning is all exactly the same way round, so feel it. You don't want it twisted inside. So go around and just make sure it's not twisted at all. Otherwise this isn't going to work. When you've got it all in, get rid of all the crinkles, even it out. Now you should have cut enough that it wraps over each other at the back there, so you haven't got a gap. So make sure you've cut enough to go right round, and make sure that your boning isn't twisted inside, that it's happy and will stand up like so. Right, we've got to get rid of that gap, so stitch that gap closed there. I've still got pins in that. Okay, so our brim is pretty much finished now. If you want to, you can do a top stitch around the top of the brim edge just to keep it nice and neat and in place. And I'll do that just to show you. You don't have to do that, but I'll do it just to show you. If you do a top stitch, don't do it through the boning, just do it on the fabric. You don't have to. Now it looks very odd because I'm using contrasting thread, but what we need to, I'll start again, Sarah. What we need to do with our drape, get the top, we need to fold over and do a narrow hem at the top and a narrow hem at the bottom. Now when you do this, try not to stretch the fabric while you're doing it because you cut on the bias, so sew it very carefully. So I'm just going to sew a narrow hem. Right, so I've done a narrow rolled over hem on both edges. If you've got a hem roller foot, that's good. To try and hold it very carefully and slowly so it doesn't stretch. And also on this, it's easier to use a larger stitch. That helps it not stretch as well. So I used, I think it was a 4.5 stitch length. Right, I've got to look for my top. Oh, there's my top with my T. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run a gathering stitch down this seam line and down this seam line, and then 2 more near the middle. So what I'm going to do is fold this in half, fold it in half again, just check I know where I am. I'm going to mark that with a bit of chalk, mark that with a bit of chalk, and the same the other end. So I'm going to run a gathering stitch between those 2 chalk marks, those 2, and down the back seams. A gathering stitch is done on the largest stitch on your needle, so normally a number 6. So I'm going to do that now. Because you've done the stitches very wide, you can now gather them up by using the bobbin thread, not the top thread. Get your bobbin thread and pull it up, and it will gather up those stitches. And what I like to do is do it from one side and then do it from the other side. Would help if I had my glasses on, I could see what I was doing. And then the same with the middle. The bobbin thread, like so. The bobbin thread again. Oh, I think I've got the top thread there. And then this one. Now we take our crown piece, here we are, that's the top, I want it right sides up, and I want this to be both right sides up with the top both together. So I'll look for my T, yes, top. Now we're going to join these. Now what you need to do is pin one end together, but you must leave a gap for your seams here. And let's get rid of all those bits of thread, goodness me. You must leave at least 1/2 inch at the top here, so that when you sew your seams, you're not going to catch in the gather. So you move up your gathering stitches until that all fits nicely, with 1/2 inch at least on either side. So pin it first, normally my advice, and then gather up the stitches if they still need a bit of a tug. And then pin them down. And then we do the same on the other side. Now with this here, this gather here and here, I'm going to put knots in the threads so that they stay gathered, but they're not actually fixed to the crown yet. No, lie. Right, once you've gathered up that end, you pin it to the end of your thing, making sure you've left at least enough room for your seam allowances either side, because you don't want to catch this in when you sew everything together. And so pin that down. Do the same the other side. So adjust your gathers and pin to the other end. So like so. Right, what I'm going to do with these two gathers, I'm not going to affix those to the hat. They're going to stay unfixed. But because I want them to be gathered up and neat and tidy, and I want the gathers to stay, I'm going to use the threads that I've left at the end with a needle to just finish off there. So I'll just do that. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this back seam to this back seam. Now, if you're not confident to do it without stitching that down first, I advise you stitch that down first, just, you know, with a stay stitch, and then join the two back seams. But I'm going to wing it because that's how I am. So make sure I haven't got any pins left in there. And now I need to get rid of the gather stitching, because I don't want that in there anymore, because that doesn't look very nice. So I'm just going to pull that out. So I've taken out my gathering stitch now. So now I've got the hat like so. Now I need to sew the top to the top. Now you need to remember where your top is and look for your pencil mark. There it is. So this is the top of my hat. Now I'm going to turn it the wrong side round, and this is the top. Now, I know that's my seam end there. I'm folding it in half, marking it with a pin at this end. Then I fold it again and mark those, match those two up, and then I mark this side and this side. So I've got all four corners marked. Now on the top, what's easier really is to fold it in half, press it with the iron, fold it in half again, matching up those two folds. So now I know where all the 4 points are on this top. So now what I've got to do is put that right sides down, and I've got to match up one with the seam, one with my pin on this side, which has promptly fallen out, I think. That's clever. Oh no, here we are. Hang on. There it is. One with my pin there. One with my pin there. Oh, wrong pin. It is a bit fiddly, this, trying to work out what's what. That one. That one. Right, so what I've done is I've matched up my pins, my 4 pins, with my 4 fold lines. Now I need to get that to join there. So you go around pinning and adjusting if you need to, and easing, so that the top will fit your crown. A bit of easing there. Okay, so the top is now pinned to that. I've left the drape hanging out the bottom. Now we've got to stitch those two together without catching the drape in, but because I've moved it out the way, we should be fine. Now it'll stitch better if you sew from the top and ease your fabric on as you go. Go slowly, because sewing rounds to straights is never easy. Now, when you've sewn it together, you need to check that you haven't caught anything that you shouldn't have done inside. So just check around the inside. There's a little pleat there. And if I was going to be finicky, I'd undo it there and just go over that bit again. But I'm not going to, because this is just a demo model. Right, now trim your seam. Again, so once you've trimmed it, just check it's all right, give it a press. Let's just wrap that round it again so you can see what's what. That's the drape. Now, to be honest, if you don't want the drape, you don't have to add it. You could just make all this without utilising the drape, but it does make it look pretty. Now we're going to have to join this to our brim. So here we have our brim, here we have our crown, and again we want right sides to right sides. I'm going to match up the back seam. Actually, I'm going to do it this way around. The back seam. Oh, I keep putting all my pins away. So I'm going to match up the back seam. And again, I want my drape to be out of the way, so I'm going to pull it off again. So it's like that. So I'm going to match that to that all the way around. You can do the quartering thing again, but I'm I think this will be fine. I don't think I need to quarter it, but if you're not confident, I would quarter it and do what we did before, mark it up. Right, once you've stitched it to your brim, check all the way around. You can take out your stay stitching now as well and trim the seam and clip it. In fact, I'm just going to clip it at the moment. Don't catch the other part of the hat in it. Just clip the seam. Right, so now we have to make the lining. Now the lining is done exactly the same as the top and the crown. So that's the top of my crown lining. I'm going to join this back seam together. I'm going to press it so that I know where the front is. I'm going to press that to match those two up. Press these sides. So I've got 4 corners with creases, 4 east, north, south, east, north, west. And I've done exactly the same with the top. I did this a little bit earlier. So I folded it in half, folded it again to match that half, and then pressed there. So now what I do is I put the right sides together. Oh, it's a good idea to press out my seam, which I forgot to do. So I'm at right sides together, top at the top, and put one of your crease marks to your seam line. Another to your other crease mark there. The other one to that crease mark there. And oh, the last one there. And now put pins in these sections so that you can stitch all the way around the top there. So the more pins you put in, the better, really. I mean, I'm not putting in loads, but you might want to put more than I'm putting in just to give you a bit more feel for how these things go together. Right, so I'm now going to sew those together on the machine. Right, so turn it round this way, right sides. Oop, 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 oop. And match up your back seam. Fold over your seam allowance on the lining. No, it's actually easier if you do it this way. You push all the hat through. It is actually a lot easier. Don't know why I didn't show you that in the first place. Do it that way. It's a lot easier to do. So what you need to do is fold your thing, all your seam allowance in all the way around. Quite a lot of fabric now. And slip stitch your lining into place. fold over, fold over, fold over. So you slip stitch that by hand. Right, once you've sewn your lining in, your hat is essentially finished. It's up to you whether you stitch down your drape, but I prefer not to because I think A, it flat packs better and you can fiddle with it. You can adjust it, but you may want to stitch it down with a tack here and there on the bottom and the top. Now of course mine shows up more because I've gone and used white thread on a dark fabric, which is not ideal, but I just thought it would show up better for you while I'm showing you how to make this hat. So there we are, the hat is made. I'll show you what it's like on a head. I hope you enjoy. As I say, this is the small brim, but it's exactly the same whether you do the much larger brim or this brim. So enjoy making. Look forward to talking to you again soon.